Boom!
Blast off!
Are you ready for action? I don't know what to do with that. Well, since the summer, so I spent some time going to various roundtable type events, and I really like them. I like them for a number of different reasons. Because firstly, I get to meet new people, and that's always fun and nice. And secondly, it means I get a chance to talk to organizations that are non-techie about tech things, and they tend to be, lawyers, accountants, construction firms, it's kind of airlines, airports, anything which does something which isn't necessarily tech-led, but obviously everything is imbued with technology these days. And there's a recurring theme that seems to keep coming up at these roundtables, and it's a general disillusionment, I suppose, with AI. The hype bubble seems to have popped, but there's a general pattern seems to be that everyone was mega excited about generative AI. People didn't quite know what to do with it, so they went to their favorite vendor of choice and bought a license for all their people for whatever the generative AI tool of choice was. And they rolled it out at great expense, and they've seen next to no ROI as a result, and a whole bunch of very similar emails, stroke press releases, stroke blog posts sort of being pumped out that still require quite a lot of human intervention because no one quite knows what to do with these generative AI kind of co-pilots. And so the general consensus is, well, it doesn't really work, it doesn't really help. And the number of times in the last few weeks, I was at one last week in Guildford, and again it came up, and the quote that came back is such and such a newspaper stated that 99% of all AI projects are currently failing at the pilot stage. And I don't know where that stat comes from. It sounds wildly plausible based on the conversations we have. The sentiment seems to be really low on the current wave of sort of generative AI tools and what the real impact that they can have. So there's lots of cool, lots of excitement, and lots of buzz, but are they really making a difference on the ground, or are they just creating headaches and bills and illusionment for people? And I think there's a general kind of trend that says people were expecting this Gen AI tooling to kind of be it. This is what we mean by AI. This is what we mean about the trigger for all the changes that we've talked about on this to come. We're actually, we think it's a little bit more than that. We've been talking a lot about the rise of agents and what agentic systems are and the difference between the two. And you've been writing, recently about, deterministic agents and things like that. But the real world don't seem to get the difference. And they use the term interchangeably, and obviously marketers have jumped on this. How do we square this circle? How do we stop the masses becoming completely disillusioned with the concept of AI before they actually understand, before we all get to grips with what the power of agentic AI really is?
I wonder what people mean when they say 99.9% or 99% of AI projects have failed. I wonder what their success criteria is. I wonder what they were trying to achieve in the first place, and I wonder who they got in to do it. I think that we are still in the early phases of this relatively new technology, but that it is starting to mature. So in terms of kind of like the mobile era, we're moving away from the fart apps now, and we're starting to get some actually useful stuff being deployed into business.
I mean, some of the things have been genuinely useful, right? I mean, there have been some labor-saving tools that have helped along the way that have come from Gen AI, and some of them have obviously just become ubiquitous now. So all you have to do is go onto LinkedIn or Facebook, X, whatever. Every other post is AI based. Every marketing post out there has been generated by ChatGPT or similar. I loved your post. I think you were trolling Sage the other day. It was fantastic. It's all right. I don't think they listen. Maybe they do.
They're going to come after me.
You basically, because everyone can spot it, right? Everyone can spot, that it's been written by the AI. It's got the same tropes, and you put together a little prompt, which basically got ChatGPT to mark its own homework. Give it an AI slop score, wasn't it?
It's quite cool actually. It's like it's a little prompt that fingerprints itself, so it knows what its own traits are as a writer and what it's and then lists all the fingerprints, and then it scores an article against these fingerprints.
Yeah, which is great. But does that mean that using generative AI to create that kind of marketing copy is actually pointless. Like, I mean, I guess again, this is kind of maybe a question for marketers, right? But okay, we know that we're talking about it now. We noticed that there was a Sage advert. We saw it. We, interacted with it. We said this is rubbish and it's inauthentic and we don't like it. But all we actually did in that process is amplify it. Right? So is
Yeah.
that a win for marketing, or is that a fail for marketing? And this kind of really feels, I mean, it was only yesterday or day before when OpenAI launched Sora 2, and which lots of marketing people have got very upset about, because obviously when you've got a platform like TikTok or Threads, or is that still a thing, Threads?
Yeah, I think it's still a thing.
Okay, right, so these kind of video Instagrams, that kind of stuff, where a lot of them are individuals who are kind of posting stuff, and that's kind of great. But actually, there's huge marketing agencies and machines behind a lot of these accounts that are putting a lot of effort into generating, viral, shareable content. All of a sudden, OpenAI has come out and said, "Nah, you can just generate it on the fly. It doesn't matter. We just go pop, 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 pop based on a prompt." And also these marketers like, well, this is my profession. Like, this is awful. What do you mean? TikTok is taking our soul. Now AI is taking the money, which is taking our soul. And so it's another kind of wave of professionals that are really pushing back, I guess, against the automation of what it is they do, but from a very defensive stance. And so it's coming from this is bad because of X, Y, and Z, rather than this is going to help me because of A, B, and C.
I think this is humanity trying to figure out where AI fits and where it should start and where we should start and stop, isn't it? We've not had to really deal with some other, I don't know, let's call it intelligence for now, some other intelligence spewing out stuff that we're consuming. And then, the whole marketing push and justification has been around co-pilots. Now that makes a lot of sense. They're there not to replace you, but to help you. So they will be a good companion to bounce ideas off of, or test the boundaries of things, or present things in a different way, or reformat things, which is great. But they can also generate something verbose from a very small prompt, which is clearly authored entirely from the training data and the inference of the AI system. And that's like me asking you a question and you writing an essay in response. And then if I took what you'd written and I put it up on the web and I said, look, this is me, that's plagiarism. Right. So what you've actually got right now is you've got a majority of people plagiarizing ChatGPT, I suppose.
Mm.
Now, that's become an issue. We're seeing things come across our desk where the quality is just not good enough, and it's clearly been produced almost entirely by some kind of chat agent. And it's been referred to as AI slop, isn't it? I think that's the term that's sort of catching on. We are now, as in like the world at large now, and our business now and other businesses now are having to fight back against this AI slop. And we're figuring out for the first time, I think, where do we draw the boundaries between what's acceptable use of AI and not acceptable use of AI? Because it is, you can tell. My my trolling of Sage in that post was not really a frustration with them. It was a frustration with everything like that, which is there has been no thinking here. Somebody said, I would like article on how agents are being used by small businesses, and they've taken whatever the chat thing has produced and they've copied it 100% without any thinking, without any kind of context engineering or prompt engineering or discussion beforehand or draft copy beforehand, and they've just taken the output verbatim and dumped it on the web. And that's what it's useless. It's pointless content, and that's what we're struggling with now. So I think there do need to be stricter guidelines, or some guidelines at least, around what you can push out, the processes by which you could push that copy out, the expected level of input before you would engage an AI agent, and the workflow. So it's okay to co-draft something, but if something is 90% not out of your head, then maybe that's a problem. So, you give people a new tool that's incredibly powerful and can save them a lot of time. I guess the issue is where do you draw the line? How do you assess quality? And there was that example of that legal case where they produced a bunch of documents in court, citing these cases that didn't exist. These cases had never come up in court, that they'd been hallucinated. So that's the danger, isn't it, of not checking your homework or asking your AI to do too much.
That's why I think that there's such power in these agentic systems and the way you string them together. I mean, we saw this, last time we published a podcast. We had Adrian on, and he was talking about his previous system that we built with him. And one of the things that we worked towards was this kind of micro personalities, making these agents very, very small and giving them a restricted tool set at each stage in the process. And one of those agents in that tool set was this critic idea, wasn't it? So, the agent comes in, one of his tools was, all the templates they could use. So they have to complete this template, which will be submitted to a legal department of a financial service company. But a critic might look at that template and say, well, actually, you've made this bit up and that bit doesn't make sense. And that actually isn't, based on where we started. So this is wrong. Go back and do it again. And you can imagine a scenario where in your Sage marketing example, that actually, if that was an agentic system, rather than an individual using a prompt to pump out a piece of marketing copy, it would be an input into a creator agent that would have created the marketing copy, and then a critic agent would have been overseeing it, saying, actually, that scored 9 out of 10 on the marketing slot meter, go back and do it again. And you kind of have this kind of self-correcting agentic system, which kind of takes the human laziness out of it, really. Because ultimately, all we're doing at the moment with these tools is we're replacing one monotonous task with another. The reason that people want to automate marketing copy is because they hate generating marketing copy. The thinking is done when you're building the campaign and you're building the themes, that kind of stuff. By the time you're actually writing individual copy for ads or writing blog posts or whatever, that's the boring bit nobody wants to do. So you just get the bot to do it, and then you've got to read it, and you've just created this other new monotonous task that everyone hates, and therefore you get slop as a result because people cut corners, and humans are fundamentally quite lazy in the main.
So going back to your opening question, I suppose, what's going wrong? Where did the disillusionment come from? I think it's so multifaceted, and we don't know what these projects are that are allegedly failing. Maybe it's the marketing copywriter. No, it's not generating the kind of engagement that they hope for. But I do think there are some lessons that we've learned along the way, and I would imagine that we're not an island. And so, from personal experience, I think one of the things that we would had to struggle with as a technology company that's kind of on the edge of things, always kind of pioneering with the latest tech that's becoming mainstream to try and make that relevant and to our customers, and to bring this additional value through this new technology. It's like, okay, well, right, we have to figure this out, get good at it, skill up on it. So we take our clever engineers and we begin all these initiatives, and we engage in this process of learning and exploration. And that's what you do right back at the beginning, right? It's a new thing, you're kind of exploring it, you're putting together various experiments, you're learning, you bring together a group of people, they kind of start bouncing off each other, you start making some kind of more meaty projects to get your teeth into. Except this is really different. This is a very new type of software. So it's a new way of building things, because you're replacing fuzziness and intelligence, and that's something I don't think many software engineers have ever had to work with before. And we've certainly never had to work with these LLMs, which are evolving rapidly and are to various degrees good or bad at what they're trying to do, depending on how you're using them. The quality of the answer depends on a lot of stuff. Hallucinations happen. How do you deal with all of this stuff? And we tried to do it on our own. Now, the people that pioneered this technology that we're all using today are not like the majority of software engineers. They live in a completely different world. It's an alien world of machine learning. And they've been beavering away in this world for 50 years, using a whole bunch of tools and techniques around machine learning that we in the other world, the software engineering world, don't really use or understand. It's not part of our day to day. We're not good at dealing with the fuzzy. We're good at dealing with instructions. So when you start building agentic systems, if you're coming at this from a deterministic traditional software engineering baseline, you're going to struggle because there are things you just don't know, concepts that you have to learn, and some of these concepts will come from this machine learning world. So how do you figure out if the quality of the answer you're getting is good? How do you have to score it? Now, we've never had to really score software before because there's a bunch of instructions that either works or it doesn't.
It's right, it's wrong. Binary.
So, so evals in agentic systems, evals and rubrics and that kind of thing are really, really important. Defining up front the success criteria is really important. And I think, I don't know if we've said it on here or not, but there's a huge chasm between a proof of concept that you can show somebody and it works 50% of the time and something you're putting into production. There's also very real limitations that you have to be aware of. So are you trying to build an agentic system without a human in the loop? Because if that's what you're trying to do at the moment, you're probably doing it wrong. That probably shouldn't be where you're starting. So, if you're building an agentic system, how do you know what's it trying to achieve? What does good look like? How are you going to evaluate that? What percentage of success are you looking for? Reliability are you looking for? Because it's not going to be 100%. So how are you going to deal with the fact that it's only 90% reliable? And how do you know if it's reliable? And how do you test that what you're doing via better context engineering or prompt engineering or whatever, that it's getting better at what you want it to do? And then where are the failure points and the checkpoints where you need that you need to bring the human in? And are you designing the system in that way in the first place? I think that probably a lot of these projects are failing because these aren't even questions that are being asked. And my learning and my big takeaway from going through this is that I fought against getting anyone involved with that machine learning background. And I didn't think, we needed that kind of understanding from the LLM world. But I think we do, because I think the expectations you have on the output and the software are different. And by bringing people in that had that expertise, it actually massively boosted our team's ability to learn and embrace new methods and tooling, an exponentially faster rate than we'd been doing it trying by ourselves. So I think I would imagine that there are a lot of, bearing in mind this is a new technology, there were a lot of businesses that went out there thinking they could sell something, didn't really put in the groundwork. They just wanted to wow. And you could see that with Salesforce, talking about agents 2 years ago before anybody, really knew what they were. And they launched these things. They set these expectations sky high. They promised the world. And of course, it falls flat. I do wonder if the fundamental issue is mis-selling. So agentic systems don't work. Proof of concepts fail. Okay. Do they? Or is it the one that you were sold was inevitably going to fail? And I think there's something in that. And I think there's that, outside of agentic proof of concepts, how we use Gen AI, the Gen AI promise, all this kind of stuff, the ROI promise that we're being told by, all of the tech giants. People are now going, yeah, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing that. And I think that's really divisive as well, because I'm not sure that you're not seeing it. I wonder if it's incredible how quickly we get used to something. I wonder how much it has affected our workflows and what we, the way we work and what we can produce and the speed at which we can respond. But we're almost, we're not recognizing that because it's just so ubiquitous now. It's just such a part of the way we do stuff.
That's tricky. I think you're right in many ways. The marketing that the big tech companies have put out have basically just enabled them to get drunk on license revenues, which have obviously increased. But over the past 6, 12 months maybe, as the business change hasn't impacted, hasn't kicked in, people have not been trained properly how to use stuff. And the boats, everyone, if you imagine everyone's in a boat, they're all kind of on the same tide and all rising at the same level, right? So all it's doing is making, if I can mix my metaphors, make the world spin faster. The hamster wheel's just going round faster. Everybody has got power to pump out marketing copy at 10 times the rate, right? So all you notice now is the quality of the copy's gone down, not the amount that you can get through has gone up. That kind of cynicism certainly seems to be in a lot of the conversations that I've been having in non-tech companies. Because a lot of these, obviously these non-tech led companies are not going to get machine learning people in. They're important to us because we're trying to build these systems, and understanding how to build effective systems that work and do deliver on the promise is super important. And so that's why we've built that capability and pushing forward with it. But if you're a solicitor or an accountant or a marketing agency, you're not going to do that. You just want tools that are effective, that you know how to use, and you're able to properly embed into your processes so that you can get real value from them. And that bit is really missing at the moment, the understanding of the difference between the marketing promise and the business reality, and how those things actually play out in this early stage of the technology.
Yeah, and I think at the moment it's still in that kind of place where it's useful, but it's not, it's not necessarily rocking your world. I was using our HR tool the other day, and they have built in an AI overview section, which is kind of good, right? Again, we're kind of going through our mid-year annual reviews, and it collects all the peer feedback and the self-review and the manager review, and then it kind of gives you an AI overview, and it makes that digestible. It's a lot of information that you can pour over, or it can kind of look at that information in the round and give you quite a detailed overview. Now that's helpful. That's really helpful. But has it saved me a lot of time? Will it change the quality of my response? Probably not. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's useful. It's really nice to have, but it's not rocked my world in terms of that one tool. And I think again, there's that disconnect, isn't it, between what you're being promised and the reality.
Yeah, talking of promise and creativity, I felt really old the other day because probably one of my favorite adverts that I can remember growing up, alongside the Nike Airport World Cup advert. That was incredible. But alongside that, there was an advert. I don't know if you remember it. It's now 20 years old, apparently. And it was, actually, I won't tell you what it's for, see if you remember, but it was 250,000 colored balls being thrown down a San Francisco hill, an empty street, and all the balls was bouncing around in slow motion, and there was a lovely melody in the background. Who was it? Bon Iver. Was it Bon Iver? Oh, maybe. You
Yeah, no,
know the advert? Know the advert?
I
Can you
remember the
see it?
advert.
Do you remember what it was for?
I don't. It's an airline, a life insurance product, or some paint. Am I close?
LCD television from Sony Bravia advert, and the advert was
Mm.
called Balls. It was 20 years old. But incredibly, no CGI, no special effects. They just put a slow motion camera on a bunch of slow motion cameras on a hill and poured 250,000 bouncing coloured balls down it.
Of course, yeah.
Incredible. That's incredible. And actually, when you watch the whole thing, it's like 5 minutes long. Obviously, on the day they cut it to 30 seconds or whatever it is on the thing. But the full thing is really cool, quite artistic, quite therapeutic. The whole thing was like, are we ever going to do anything like this ever again? Yes, you could have the idea, and you could type it into Sora 2 now and get it to generate it for you. But it's not going to have that same wow factor, is it? It's not going to have that same magic anymore because it wasn't created by a human. The idea is human, but it's kind of inauthentic in the delivery of it. So does it have the same impact? Is it as artistic? Is it? And it kind of talks to that human creativity thing that you mentioned earlier. And we've seen maybe, or there's a tendency where as technology catches up particularly in videos, that we then try to use the technology to reintroduce the authenticity. So I think they remade like a Thunderbirds movie 15, 20 years ago. But also it was all done with CG rather than puppets. But they put the strings in the CG to make them look like puppets. Or stop motion videos, another one. The original Wallace and Gromits, were all bits of plasticine being moved around with stop motion cameras. The latest one is CG, but it's made to look like it was done with stop motion cameras. And so you kind of try to reintroduce this level of authenticity, which you lose because the technology does it all for you. It loses its magic. It loses something. Is that a real thing, or is that just, I don't know, looking through rose tinted glasses about the good old days?
I think it is a different thing. I think it's a different genre. But I don't. And again, we're figuring out what that means at the moment. Those adverts that took a huge amount of creativity and ingenuity to make. I'm thinking of the British Airways one in my head, actually, as you were talking, where there's the millions of people and they make that kind of flag on the ground and there's got that like emotive music over the top of it. To make that advert would be or is an incredible feat of creativity and ingenuity. And now you can do similar with a prompt. And we as humans don't value that because there's no effort. So, we like works of art. We like going to the theatre or watching a movie, or we can appreciate those kind of adverts, or, we celebrate when somebody does their personal best in a marathon because of the amount of effort that's had to go in to get that result. And we can all agree that is something that can be measured and respected. And yeah, we've never really been in a situation where you can achieve similar results, but in an instant and without any of the effort. I don't know. I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier was the sort of Saw 2 thing and the kind of memes about Sam Altman that's been generated off the back of that. And then OpenAI are an embryonic product company, and it is very different the way they ultimately roll out their technology to, I think, the way Google or Anthropic roll out, or Microsoft for that matter, and they get criticized for it. But one of the things they're doing or have done recently is almost like an Instagram or a TikTok, but just AI generated stuff. And then people are complaining, well, I don't want to see my feed just full of AI generated stuff. But I bet they do. I bet in a few months or a year's time that is going to be normal, and they will have found a place, and we'll think, oh look, this is funny. It's doom scrolling up through AI generated slop. Now that will be different to doom scrolling through genuine ideas or stories of
People-generated slop.
people out there in the world doing real things. There's probably room for both. And what we think is kind of like now probably will just be accepted and another accepted norm, like further down the line. I actually think maybe OpenAI are onto something here. If they did do some kind of TikTok equivalent for Sora 2 videos, I could see people engaging with that. I can see some other opportunities for influencing and revenue.
Yeah, I mean, the cynic in me said that when was it? When did they first release their image model? And everyone went nuts for it, and there was everyone was posting plastic wrapped dolls of themselves and all that kind of stuff. They were basically
I loved it. I loved
it was brilliant. It was brilliant. But OpenAI were absorbing all of the cost for the generation of that material, that content, and then the content was being placed on other people's platforms who were then generating all the money from ad revenue off the back of it. So OpenAI are paying for it. Microsoft, Google, et al., Facebook, Meta, whatever, they're all making loads of cash off it. So the cynic in says, well, they just want to capture some of that revenue rather than just absorb all the cost. So I think that's part of it. But I think there's a wider thing going on with OpenAI. I mean, they've had a long, well-publicized relationship with Microsoft, which appears to be coming apart at the seams. There's definitely some tension in there for one reason or another. There was a big they're either going through or have just finished a corporate restructure, which enables them now to kind of act more independently as a business. So they were restricted before, for example, in issuing new equity, so they could raise funds, right? So they couldn't sell shares, they couldn't give equity away to raise funds. Now, under this new restructure, they are able to do that. And the CFO came out and he basically said the whole point here is that we want OpenAI to be a full stack business. Now, full stack for OpenAI means something a little bit different to maybe a software engineering business. Full stack for OpenAI makes you think more of like, well, what do Google do? You think they've got their sights on what Google have been doing over the last 25 years. So what is everything you need within your organization if you're all about? So yes, okay, make some LLM, build some models, fine. But actually, right at the beginning of that stack, you need a lot of power. Right. So they're going to be building power plants or doing power generation. Okay. And then what's the next step? Well, we need chips. We're going to have our own bespoke chips, just like, Google have got their own bespoke in-house chips, the way they run their stuff. It's data centers. We're going to own the data centers. Okay. That's an easier leap. You can see how maybe that would make sense rather than using, Azure or someone else. We're going to have our own data centers. Fine. Next one up, yes, we've got the models, the developers, they're going to sit in our data centers. That's going to drive. That's the next layer in the stack. Then you've got, the hardware, the gadgets, whatever the new pin is, and the phone and the cup and whatever it is going to be bring AI into our physical world, and then the software layer on top, right? So the TikTok clone, or whatever as ChatGPT as it is in its current form, and end to end, they're going to own and monetize the entire stack in the same way that Google do right now, with their ecosystem.
Well, actually, I think you just perfectly described Apple there. They're
Yeah.
completely vertically integrated, right? So
Hmm.
they're, like you said, they own the end to end, and you saw the transition Apple went through most recently, I suppose, to move away from Intel chips, and now they own all their own silicon. That was one bit of the stack that they didn't control, and now they do. I mean, is that do you believe that? Do you think that's where OpenAI are going? That they want to be the next Apple?
Absolutely. They're going to be the next Apple, the next Google, the next Microsoft. They want to own the whole thing. And Microsoft have tried to do it as well over the years, haven't they? Also, they've got the software and they've got the data center. They sort of failed a bit on the gadgets, haven't quite nailed that
Do you
bit.
think that's even possible though? So, because what you're describing there sounds a bit mental. You've got Nvidia that are the world's AI chip maker at the moment. You've got Google and Amazon and Microsoft that are the world's data centers at the moment. So, could it really make sense for OpenAI to start making chips or to start owning data centers?
I think so. They don't necessarily have to sell them to everyone else, right? So, Google have their own proprietary chips that they use to run their systems. They just don't necessarily sell them to everyone, or not in a way that we all understand. So I don't think they're going to replace NVIDIA and start making graphics cards and GPUs, maybe consumer ready. But I don't see why they wouldn't build chips which are designed specifically in the same way Apple have done with Apple Silicon, designed specifically to run their software in the most optimal way.
I think the issue is the scale, isn't it? The that's why they need the infrastructure, because that amount of is global. It's global compute that you need.
Yeah, we see, Microsoft, for example, dropping data centers under the ocean to kind of deal with their own cooling systems, and they're using wave power to generate energy. And it's about,
Mm.
it's about the scale that you want to do. And now they may not succeed, but they say this kind of corporate restructure was really designed to enable them to raise cash. So at least let them try. Because at the moment, they're just hemorrhaging. They're just hemorrhaging cash, which, take us back to the beginning. They're generating stuff which enables everyone else to make money, and they need to start trying to capture some of that value. So
Yeah,
maybe
it's
TikTok
funny.
clone is the way to go.
I do. I think I am a bit biased in the same way that I was biased towards Apple when they first produced the iPhone, and I became quite an Apple fanboy. Other phones do exist. Now I think with ChatGPT, but also with what OpenAI are doing more widely, I find them very interesting as a company, and I do think they have this completely different. It feels different. What they're doing feels different to what Anthropic are doing and what Google are doing, what Microsoft are doing, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it is tied to that kind of product bit. The mission that they have for GPT is very different to, I think, Gemini or Copilot, whatever. That they're very intent upon making this the most useful personal assistant for the world. They want to make ultimately a companion for people. And the way that they develop GPT is very much geared around that mantra. And then you can see sort of the stuff that they're focusing on, so most recently, they've started to allow you to buy stuff, or they're going to allow you to start buying stuff through ChatGPT. They're it's a very consumer focused thing. Copilot's a very work focused thing. Gemini's really good, but it feels all over the place. It feels like it's not a cohesive strategy. So I don't know. I think I have this slight bias at the moment towards OpenAI, and I'm interested in what they're doing more. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why that is, but it's got these kind of Apple vibes.
I think all of them are obviously desperately trying to capture the next wave of consumer spend. Like this next period is going to be what Google was to search and Apple was to phones, right?
Maybe it's because they're the underdog. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the Apple.
How can you call OpenAI the underdog now?
I think they look at what they're going up against though. They're the new kid on the block.
Sure. But I think all of them at the moment are reinventing what's going on. So over the summer, I don't know if you saw this, Google introduced AI mode into the UK search results. So they've always had for a long time now. We've had that kind of summary thing, but now there's a little toggle in the UK that you can toggle into AI mode, and it just gives you that. So you ask a search and it just gives you the response. That becomes a default. Now it's not on by default yet, but you feel they're testing the market. Okay, when is it ready to switch it over, and what's the commercial model going to be behind that? We saw at Google's conference earlier in the year, they were kind of doing this completely agentic checkout. So you would search for a product and you could buy the product via the search engine online, completely automated. And I don't think that's out yet, but it's in kind of developer preview. What you mentioned there, OpenAI are trying to do the same thing, but via ChatGPT. So you can buy products from Etsy and others just using the chatbot. So completely capturing that entire experience. And there's obviously lots of organizations that are not very happy about this. If you make your money out of content distribution, you're a magazine, you're a newspaper, you're some other publication, you're going to start losing a lot of revenue if everybody uses AI mode via Google search, right? Because a vast majority of their revenues come via Google search. I think it was the Daily Mail Online said that half their revenue has disappeared since June because they're not coming in via Google search anymore. They're either coming in from the chatbots summary. The people are getting the summary of the content. They're not clicking onto the platform, going to the website, so they're not able to make the money off the ads that are being served by the web. The revenues are falling off a cliff. So they need a new monetization model. And that's going to be the same for shops. How do shops do upsell, cross-sell if you're buying directly from whatever the chatbot tells you to buy? How are you going to compete against the number one product that the chatbot's pushing? Am I going to pay to put my product at number one in the chatbot so I'm the only one that ever gets bought? How does that ecosystem work? How does it all hang together? We've seen this with, you mentioned Gemini looking a bit all over the place. They've got a genius advert out at the moment. I think it's the advert episode, but I think if you've seen it, it's a bunch of people walking around with ice creams. Have you seen this?
No,
So there's a bunch of people walking around the streets with a vanilla ice cream, and they're talking to it and they're holding it to their ear. And there's a billboard that's like on one side it says the new ice cream, and then it changes to the new ice cream, all new ice cream pro, and it's exactly the same thing. And then there's just a woman who's got a Google phone in her hand, takes a picture of she's outside a florist, takes a picture of a flower, and Gemini tells her which of the flowers to buy to combine them together to make the perfect bouquet. And it's obviously a dig at Apple, right? Why would you want vanilla when you can have Gemini? And they've integrated that Gemini into their Google phones and really built some momentum behind. Why would anyone upgrade their iPhone right now? Unless you that you can't replace your battery anymore. There really is no point. So switch ecosystem, because all the cool stuff is coming from the software that's being deployed into the Google phone. So they do seem, they've got a real clear direction around that consumer space. And Anthropic are really obviously going after the developer market with what they do with their AI.
Everyone's going after that market now.
And obviously, all part of this fallout between Microsoft and OpenAI may be looped into this. But the default now with VS Code, for example, is Sonnet 4, not GPT-5. You can still select GPT-5, and they claim it's because they auto select the model which is most optimized and based on what you're doing. But it defaults to Sonnet 4, and you have to switch it out to GPT-5. Now, make of that what you will. But there's definitely there's a shift happening. Consumer behavior is massively shifting, and we're capturing that people's money and people's attention, people's ad spend, however that looks like over the coming 5-10 years. I don't think anyone really knows what that looks like right now. So there's lots of these kind of little experiments going on to kind of see where the pieces fall and where behavior shifts land.
Yeah, and we've said it on here before, but I think this whole ambient computing is kind of where we're at. I think computers are disappearing into the background, and not just computers, but software as well. And if you think about what do you use the web for most of the time, looking stuff up, right? What's a better way to look stuff up? Because it can format the answer in exactly the way you want it. AI. So the information is on the web. Great. You might go to that storefront on the web, like Amazon.com, buy your thing, and to really drill into the product reviews and see the pictures and that kind of stuff. But you'll do your research in a chat window. So I don't know. I think the chat window is here to stay. Where they say the chat window, that could be the camera, right? Because you're taking the picture of that flower and it's suggesting the bouquet. But this very interface that gets you to the answer in the way you want it in the quickest possible way. I'm not some software system that forces you down a bunch of pre-prescribed routes, or makes you individually look stuff up, compare them side by side, that kind of thing, because the AI layer does that all for you. The opportunities to monetize that is what everyone is fighting over, isn't it? And I guess that's why why you're seeing this Shopify integration, this Etsy integration with ChatGPT that's happening at the moment.
Yeah, it has interesting, I think, impacts, consequences on anyone that's developing products and putting them out there in the wild. People are desperately trying to find the ways that AI interfaces with the user experience, and the default is we'll just put a chat interface on it. Fine. But actually, if the future is no one's going to find your product, no one's going to get to your product, because there is a gateway layer on top, whether it's Google or OpenAI or whatever it is, which is serving up the product or serving up the functionality to the user in an interface that you don't control.
I think the companies will control the interface, but that interface won't be the web page that you look at now. And this is what's going to change. I think it's going to change massively over the next few years. And we hear the tech industry talk about this a lot. I don't know how much of this has really kind of made it into the wider consciousness. But when we talk about software now, one of the things that's in the back of our minds is, are we designing this for agents? Are agents going to be able to use this? So if you're designing a website today, then are you thinking about how an agent is going to consume that content? Probably not. You're probably not, but you probably should be. And this is what everybody in the tech sphere is trying to figure out right now. And when you see these new protocols coming out, they're essentially to enable this world where you're designing software for software to use, which is a strange way of thinking about it, right? But that's essentially what you're doing. And going back to this Shopify and Etsy integration that OpenAI have just introduced and are rolling out into ChatGPT, there is a more important, I believe, announcement behind that, which is, as part of that, they have developed something called the Agentic Commerce Protocol. So that is the protocol that is enabling the companies, Shopify and the company Etsy, to do what they're doing. So, and OpenAI have open sourced that protocol, which is a really interesting move. So they're trying to put something out there which is saying, look, this is the future of commerce. This is what you use, and it's open source and it's free, and it's not tied to us or anything, but this is what you use if you want to build e-commerce experiences that work well with agents. So, got your website, fine. This is, when mobile came out, we were always saying you've got to build for both platforms. You've got to build for the web. You've got to build for mobile because your users are going to be consuming your services from both of these two things, and they're different worlds, or they were at the time. That is happening again. But what you would say now is you've got to build for not just people that are accessing your product from the web, not just people that are accessing your product through a mobile UI, but agents. And actually, when we went through the kind of whole web, mobile, cloud thing, we've already done the hard work of making these views fairly lightweight and having all the services on the back end. Well, now you've got to open up those services to agents. And OpenAI have open sourced the Agentic Commerce Protocol as a way for you to do that. So Shopify is still Shopify and Etsy is still Etsy. You can still go to their website, or you can go to their mobile app, or you can go to any agent interface and get connected to their services. So this Agent Commerce Protocol does some really cool stuff, right? It allows you to basically query the products. It allows you to put stuff in your basket, and it handles payments. So it's a front door onto existing systems. It's just serving it up in a different way that's making it accessible to agents. And then by virtue of the fact it's accessible to agents or LLMs, it's making it accessible to chat interfaces. So you can now do your shopping via your chatbot of choice. I think this is massive, by the way. I think this is one of these, we talked about these big protocols in the past and how they're just emerging now and how this is an incredibly exciting time. And we talked about MCP, we talked about agent to agent, which is Google's one. I think this Agentic Commerce Protocol is massive. Now, will OpenAI win the fight for the open protocols on this one? I don't know. Maybe there'll be something else. But this is another one of those fundamental things which all of us people that are now building agents and thinking in this new world are going to kind of jump on and go, "Oh, now we've got this whole new way of doing e-commerce. Now let's build on top of this."
This is the frontier right now, isn't it? This is where product managers, product owners, product directors need to be thinking about how do you capture the attention and ultimately the coin of your users.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's going to be software talking to software. It is as important, and the way that pans out over the next however many months and years, it's going to be vital to not only the current generation of products, but for whatever's coming next.
Yeah. So if you're a behemoth like Shopify or Etsy, and you happen to have done a really fancy deal with OpenAI, then you've got in right at the beginning. Nobody's using this yet, so you're right there. But what about everyone else? What about all these other retailers? What about all these products that serve the retail market? You guys, the retailers and the product people that serve the retailers, need to be looking at this. You need to be looking at the Agentic Commerce Protocol and getting your products in front of agents or exposing your products to LLMs, because that is the next frontier of commerce. Absolutely believe that.
Well, I think with that, that's the pod.